I'm Dan Drake. This is Visitor Network TV. Our guest today is Rick Atherton, Chairman of the Board of Selectmen of the town of Nantucket. Rick, thank you for joining us.
Always happy to be with you, Dan.
And it's a new season.
Hey, we're through our every other week summer season where things sort of slow down a little bit from the Board of Selectmen point of view.
Right, but also from the standpoint of traffic and...
Yeah, right. Well, we slow down, the community speeds up, and I think we all feel it.
Right.
You know.
Anyway, there's some issues that are facing the Board of Selectmen and the town in terms of policy, and why don't we talk first about a couple of the things that are on the agenda for tonight's meeting. One being the in-town bike path.
Yeah, we have a workshop meeting tonight, which means the board is basically trying to communicate with each other and with a few invited people who are interested and knowledgeable about our two agenda items. It's not a public meeting in that sense, but sometimes people may raise their hand, but the idea is that we get to communicate directly.
We actually get some work done.
Well, that's the idea. You know, in a normal meeting, it's really very hard. You've got a lot of agenda items, and to spend enough time really communicating about the issues and what's on your mind, it takes more time than we're allowed in a regular meeting. So tonight we're talking about the in-town bike path, which the current plan comes out Washington Street Extension across the old railroad bed to Orange Street, and is to go out as a bike lane from that location near Hatches, just out to the Rotary.
A bike lane in the road. A
bike lane in the road. And the road might get widened a couple of feet at the most. But really, I think some of us look at that and say, you know, bike lanes are fine when the roads are wide enough to really be effective. On Nantucket, a bike lane going out some of our narrow streets is really not much different than where they are today. You can paint a line, and it helps make it clearer for traffic. You've got to be careful, but it's not the same thing.
But if you don't have two lanes,
it's tough. So we have a design. It has two lanes. It has a short bike lane on each side. And I think people have thought over the years whether or not that section from Washington Street Extension may be coming down the railroad bed, but cutting and going across behind marine lumber in front of the creeks would be just an outstanding route if we could do it. There's a lot of concern about wetlands there, and it may not be easy, and so on. But it would be truly spectacular in terms of the view.
And so it would go around, theoretically at least, Marine and our island home.
Yes, exactly.
And close to the Rotary.
Right, and it could come back in. The Otison property now is owned by the land bank. Eventually, I think they have a life estate, but you could come back in there, and it would be off of the road, and it would, as I say. So I think the board has expressed their individual interest in this as a preferred route, but over the years when this has come up, it's been made clear to us it's not going to be easy. It could be expensive, and I think if, you know, we may end up with some kind of hybrid where we work on that longer term and maybe do this short term. I don't know how the discussion will flow.
Is the state involved in this?
Bike paths, aside from the Hummock Pond recently, but bike paths essentially have been funded by, we get something like, I think it's federal money flowing through the state, $300,000 to $400,000 a year. So that's not enough to put all of a bike path in 1 year, and so we phase them. The Cliff Road bike path was phased in sections, and this is supposed to be phased in sections. The first phase would, again, come across the old railroad bed, coming by Goose Pond, up to Orange Street there, and
by Hatches.
By Hatches, and sort of widen the Orange Street, you know, 100 yards either side of where the bike path would come into the road. The next section would carry it on further. But that could take 3 years. In the meantime, I occasionally get calls from people saying, you know, Rick, you've got to do something about the bikes on Orange Street. It's dangerous. I came in yesterday to town like 3:30, and there'd been an accident right around the Goose Pond corner. Looked to me like bicycles were involved. Not sure about that, but it's not an easy route for bike riders. So that's topical.
One thing.
That's a good thing to talk about.
Absolutely. What's the second item?
The second item is our island home. A couple weeks ago, our island home work group, who's been working for probably 18 months now. David Worth has been the chairman. There are about 5 or 6 members of that committee, a broad spectrum of community volunteers. And we've all known for years that our island home is difficult to maintain where it is. There are a number of issues. We have 45 beds. Anybody will tell you that the number of beds is not economical. You've got to have at least 100 or more beds to be economical. So the town supports it because it's a community thing to take care of our own, so to speak. But there are problems in that. The building itself is something over 30 years old. It's starting to get citations from the state for things we have to improve, and those improvements are going to become significant. Now, how much they're going to be, who knows, but I think people are talking about over the next 3 or 4 years, if we stay in that facility, we're talking about several $1 million of upgrades to bring it up to code.
So what are the alternatives?
Well, let me go back to another problem. The other problem is the income, and the federal reimbursement through Medicare and Medicaid is not growing as fast as our cost structure. So we're going to find ourselves squeezed from the inside, from the revenue side as well. So we got two different problems, Dan. Over time, and this recommendation from the work group suggests one is to move the facility, recreate it someplace. We've had discussions about whether it might work at Sherburne Commons or whether it might work in connection with the hospital or whether it might work as a new standalone facility. Another option, obviously, is to just close it down. That's not very attractive from a community point of view, but it's an option. Clearly, if we move the facility, the location where it is today is worth a significant amount of money. And I think
unless we run a bike path through it.
Well, yeah, but you know, that's a good use of the property. I think everybody hopes that the property will remain in some conservation mode and that the land bank would be a hopeful participant in that process. If they're coming in through the old Otison property and if they come across the creeks to pick up our island home, it helps maintain. And I think to use land bank property for a bike path would be quite appropriate.
Oh yeah, that certainly would be. But I mean, in thinking in terms of value, you know, I have trouble with one charitable entity or another charitable entity sort of buying something from another one.
I understand. And I've seen that before at times, in the sense the town owns it right now. But it is a significant funding source and has been talked about openly for many years.
No, that's true.
As a real contributor. If you started our island home fresh in a new location, it might cost a substantial amount of money, you know.
Does the town also own the land under Landmark House, the old island home?
You know, I don't know offhand. I mean, it's a nonprofit on its own, Dan, but the land underneath, I'm not sure who has fee to that. At the moment, there's been no discussion about moving that. It seems to be working fine, meets its community need.
It's a very old building.
Right. And, I should mention the other thing that it's under discussion is that the model for our island home is changing in the marketplace. And the longer individuals aging can stay in their own home, perhaps with assistance, usually the better and more economical it is. So that model might change the way a new island home would be configured. The move that the hospital's talking about might tie into this at some point.
Does Sherburne Commons potentially tie into this?
It could as well. I think the main economic reason to look at both those entities is to share sort of the core facilities, kitchen facilities, you know, doing the laundry could work for both our island home beds as well as the hospital or Sherburne Commons. Sherburne Commons, as we know, had a sale underway. That seems to have slowed down. We're not quite sure how that's going to play out. So those are both options. Which one makes more sense in the long run, I'm not sure. But the town is going to have to either face up, as I said, to significant improvements where it is, and I'm not sure that makes sense to keep upgrading a building that's aging. I think we're better off to think about a new model.
Okay.